Hey, you.
Yeah, you. Getting that college education.
What are you gonna do? Graduate and take some office job?
Be like everybody else.
Or will you dare to do something different?
Like, be a teacher. You could be my teacher.
You got the skills.
The smarts.
Yes, you.
You could be the teacher I never forget.
That'd be cool.
Does that corporate job even have recess?
What are you gonna make of yourself?
What are you gonna make of me?
Your son wants to get a cat,
I'll really take care of it.
but you're allergic. Do you A, prepare yourself, B, make the best of it,
C squared equals...
25.
Good job!
or C, find a loophole? When it comes to parenting, there are no perfect answers, but that's okay, because you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Teens in foster care will love you just the same.
The following program was provided by an independent producer, solely responsible for its content. The views, information, or opinions expressed during this program series are solely those of the host and guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Brainstorm, bringing great minds and ideas together, exploring a wide variety of opportunities, achieving academic excellence, using the latest technology, government's impact, preparing for 21st century careers, parenting and health issues, topics shaping tomorrow. Brainstorm with Lisa Willever, bringing great minds and ideas together.
Welcome to Brainstorm. I'm Lisa Willever, and today we're talking about the opioid crisis. Before we begin, let's learn a little bit more about our topic. Today, America is in the throes of an epidemic, and our current opioid crisis presents a unique set of challenges, with many drug addictions starting with a legitimate injury, followed by prescription painkillers and the misuse of over-the-counter medicines. The dilemma for many parents is when to address the confusion surrounding when medicine helps you feel better and when use turns into abuse. The question remains, when is it too early and when is it too late to start that dialogue? Joining me today, I have County Prosecutor Angelo Onofre.
Hey Lisa, great to be here.
Thank you so much for coming. And I have Katie Hooven. Now you're a doctor, but you're Dr. Katie Hooven of nursing, correct?
Nursing and public health.
Nursing and public health. Well, I am so happy to have both of you here today because you both bring a unique perspective to something that's very perplexing to the entire country, and I think sometimes very misunderstood. So the first thing I want you to do is just give me a little bit of your background before we get started on the opioids.
I've been with the office for 22 years, and really over the course of that 22 years, we've really seen this opioid crisis explode, particularly in the last 2 years. My office has developed a few strategies and programs to try to combat that, including the use of Narcan, new programs called CARE, which is Community Addiction Recovery Effort, which instead of putting somebody through the criminal justice system, it's trying to get them into treatment so that we stop breaking that cycle of crime. And I do think that the opioids really is one of the greatest issues that we have facing us today.
Thank you so much. And what's your background, Katie?
I am a nurse. I've been a nurse for about 13 years. Went on for my master's and my PhD in nursing. I teach nursing and public health at the College of New Jersey, and I actually do a lot of work with population health in the city of Trenton and the surrounding areas, working with kids, childhood obesity, obviously teaching future nurses, and again, the narcotic epidemic is huge and something that nurses specifically have to be aware of and what their impact is on kind of prevention of this issue.
Well, that's wonderful. Now, the whole reason we do Brainstorm is to share information, and this is a topic that as a parent and as a former teacher, it really, I look back, I taught in an inner city, and I know I've seen some of my former students who this has affected them, it has affected their family members, and you both see it every day. How is this different from epidemics in the past? What do you think has really propelled this one to be at the level it's at right now, Ange?
I think there's really two causes for it. The first, as you mentioned in your opening, is that the addiction can start based legitimately from valid prescriptions, and then when that doesn't work, then people turn to other avenues, or the doctors aren't writing the prescriptions in the amount that they were before. And that's when the people are starting to turn to heroin. And it's incredibly addictive. And now we're starting to see the introduction of fentanyl and carfentanil, which are more powerful than heroin. And we're starting to see that being introduced into the heroin in this area more and more. The other thing, I think, is the purity levels that we're seeing nowadays. Heroin's cheap. Here in Mercer County, it's selling for between $2 and $3 per deck, which is the rough equivalent of a Splenda packet.
Okay, so a deck is the size of a Splenda
Yeah,
packet. Okay.
in general terms.
And $2 to $3.
$2 to $3.
Okay.
Compared to an oxycodone pill, which is selling for $1 a milligram, which the 20 milligrams is the common dose, about $20.
For one pill.
For one pill compared to the heroin. And the heroin levels are purer now. We've been seeing a progression from 2016, where we were at a 62 to 65% purity level, to 2017, where we were 65 to 68%, and the purity level now should be over 70%, which now means that the kids and the people are starting to get addicted to it are now able to snort it, as you would with cocaine, which is also causing more addictions. In other words, it's kind of become chicer now.
Okay.
Before, we used to think of the heroin addict as the person on the streets with the dirty with the needle in their arm, but it's not. It can literally be anyone today.
How's your experience with this been as it's been progressing?
I would say exactly what he said about the prescriptions and how it starts with the legitimate use. And the fact that it doesn't affect just a single sector of people, it can affect everybody equally. And then the stigma associated with it, trying to, go up to somebody and ask them if they have an issue, having somebody kind of be honest about the issues that they're having. I think as society, we kind of shun these drug users, and so just obviously terminology when we speak about this issue, knowing that there's psychological components that are pieced together with this addiction, and so you can't just tell someone stop using. It's much more complicated than that. So I think there's a lot of facets that go into why this is such a huge issue.
And I do think in the general public sometimes there is that just stop. Like you see what it's doing to your life. Why don't you just stop? And people don't realize the addiction, how strong it is, and especially with all the things, how this is elevated from, where people used to use marijuana or other drugs. It's a whole nother ballgame, isn't it? I mean, this is not even
It's true.
close.
NewJersey.com did a study of heroin addiction in New Jersey, and the article was called Heroin Town. In that article, it estimated that here in New Jersey, there were 128,000 active heroin users. The residents of Heroin Town, in this fictional town,
128,000?
Which would be the fourth, if everyone were in the same town, it would be the fourth largest municipality in New Jersey.
Wow.
Last year, we saw about 2,600 overdose deaths throughout New Jersey, which is more deaths than the populations of 60 towns in New Jersey. And that's on top of everyone having the Narcan, which is the opioid antidote. And so there are a number of people that are being saved, but we're still experiencing these dramatic increases in overdose deaths. I think one of the other things that was interesting about Heroin Town, it really goes to Katie's point, that it can be anyone, and that there's a stigma attached. But when they reviewed who the heroin users were, they were between 17 and 79 years old.
79?
79.
I don't think most people would think for a moment.
They were doctors, lawyers, teachers, housewives, soccer moms, athletes, dancers. It was from every walk of life. The other thing that was very interesting about it is that the majority of the population of Heroin Town and the heroin users in New Jersey are between 18 and 26-year-old white males.
Really?
And that I think has a lot to do with athletic injuries. And I also think that it has a lot to do with just how easy heroin is to get these days.
Now, when you're talking about injuries and we're talking about the confusion, you know, the medicine, when should parents start talking to kids? You know, up until recently, you gave your children medicine because they had a cough. You gave them cough medicine, or you give them ibuprofen or acetaminophen, whatever you're giving them for their pain, and you don't really think about it. Do we now really need to sit down with kids and say to them, like, I'm going to give you this because you have a fever or because you have an injury? I mean, are we at that point where we need to start? Because, you know, it seems very confusing. I'm trying to think if I'm a child. These things are in my house. Like cocaine wasn't in people's houses. You know, kids didn't open a cabinet and find a bag of pot in their house. But these medicines that lead to this are in the house. And, you know, it's a child-proof lid. Most of the kids can open them once they hit a certain age. So at what point do we really need to sit down and explain to kids the purpose of this medicine, but also how it could turn into a lifelong problem that could end up taking your life? Like, when do we do that?
I mean, I think even in nursing, one of our biggest things is trying to be proactive instead of reactive. And a lot of the things that are happening now are kind of after the fact, right? Treatment. Yeah. So the big thing that you're talking about is this prevention and education and just talking to kids about maybe showing them some of the specific cases of maybe kids that they know or friends, being open about it as this is a disease. You know, this is something that people need help to get, and just be honest with what the medicine's for. Maybe being less prescriptive, as everything doesn't always have to be cured by a drug. Yeah. Trying to kind of, you know, educate people in other ways. If there's other things you can do, take a walk outside, drink water, more sunlight, things like that, instead of just curing every ailment with a pill. I think obviously that's a societal issue as well.
And I think, you know, just from people I know, so this is all anecdotal, this isn't any kind of study, but a lot of people are afraid to bring the topic up to their children because they think if I talk to them about drugs, it will send them to use them. And I think the reality is the opposite. I think the more knowledge children have about any topic is going to help them to make better decisions. And if another child tries to persuade them to do something they shouldn't do, if they have that knowledge, it will help them. I mean, you come across people every day that I'm sure if somebody had told them early on, maybe it would have made a difference. Do you see that?
I think for some people it may have made a difference, but as Katie was saying before, it's so much more than just, you know, saying just stop. There's psychological issues going on with it. There's, you know, that addictive personality that keeps drawing the person back. So it's very, I think for some it would work, but one of the things that occurred here in New Jersey last year was the legislature passed a law that said doctors can now only prescribe a 5-day supply of pain pills, oxycodone, Percocets, where before it was up to a 30-day supply. And from my understanding is the doctors are now, and the medical professionals are more saying, don't fall in love with this. This is only to get you through. If you can tolerate the pain with Tylenol or Advil, do that. Only use these as a last resort. And I think that's a big issue. So going back to your point, I think the parents need to start talking with the doctor first and understanding what this pill will do that's been prescribed, and then talking to their children about it and trying not to use that prescription strength painkiller.
Okay. Well, you know what, we're going to take a break, and we will be back with more on opioids, so we'll see you in a minute.
So there you are, shuffling through a stack of resumes, and you come to mine. This is it, first impression, my way in. But can my resume show you how I truly stand out? Like that I was studying, going to night school while working 2 jobs just to help my parents pay for groceries. Or being the first one to always step up. No, that's something you just can't put on paper. Look beyond the resume and discover new ways to develop great talent that is dedicated, hardworking, and determined like me.
They told me a bottle couldn't dream. That I would never become a superhero. But I learned how to fly. Just to come back in a new disguise. And be the hero that I've always wanted to be.
Look at you. You're at the top of your game. You're unstoppable. Nothing can throw you off track. Wait, is that your car? Uh-oh. Yeah, I saw that coming. That will throw you off track. You're looking at around 10 grand in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Let's try this again. Smart move. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
We're back with more Brainstorm, and we are talking about opioids today. I'm joined by Angelo Onofre and Dr. Katie Hooven. And, you know, everything that we've been talking about in this episode leads you to believe that this is such a big crisis that we need to do two things. We need to react, but we need to prevent. And schools can play such an integral part of that. When do schools start? Are they doing this in the elementary schools? Because it seems like middle school's too late to just start the introduction. Is this something that's occurring in elementary schools, to your knowledge?
In some towns, it's starting there. And as Katie mentioned, it's starting with the tobacco, and it's starting with alcohol and those measures. As you get into middle school, that's where the drop-off is a little bit. And then once you get back into high school, then it starts full force. Just one of the programs that's occurring here in Mercer County is Drug Awareness Week that the Hamilton Township schools are doing. And that involved my office training all of the health and physical education teachers in the current street term, showing them what the product looked like, how it's packaged, more of an awareness for the teachers. Because the minute the teachers start talking about drugs with the students, if they're not using the right terms, they lose all credibility. So we thought that was important to do.
I wouldn't have even thought of that, but that's true because they have their own terminology and lingo, and you know, you're up there trying to say, listen, don't do this, but you're saying the wrong words. They're not going to take them seriously.
They just tune them out. Then we go into the schools each week, and my office does a day where we talk about the opioid epidemic, we talk about Narcan, and we talk about New Jersey's probably most important tool that we have, and that's the Overdose Prevention Act. The Overdose Prevention Act was signed by Governor Christie about 5 years, be 5 years on May 2nd this year. And that provides immunity for people who call the police or emergency responders if someone's experiencing an overdose. And that's helped to save a lot of lives. So we're trying to educate the students about that also, as well as the effects of each of these drugs that they may hear their peers talking about, to let them know in reality what the long-term effects are and also what the short-term effects can be. And one of those big short-term effects is if it's a wrong mixture of the heroin, it could be death, even on your first try.
Yeah, and that's scary that one mistake a child makes could be a fatal mistake because of, you know, whatever the substance was that they were exposed to at that point. What has your experience been with the children in the schools, especially you're on a college campus? Are they coming to you seeming to know about these things, or are they still a little behind the curve? Because it's changing so rapidly.
I think educators, is in terms of relatability, so kind of even in nursing, having the confidence, you have to, you know, tell them exactly what's going on in the hospital when you teach in the classroom. And I think it's the same with the kids. If you're not trying to explain something that's actually happening on the streets and you're trying to relate that and have them kind of look at you as a prospective mentor or as an educator, and you're not using the correct terms and you're not actually aware of what's going on, you lose all credibility and they kind of tune you out. So I think it's everyone in their lives. I think it's teachers, I think it's nurses, I think it's public awareness. I don't think it should just come from parents. I think it needs to come from parents as well, but we should all be on the same page, have the same level of education, and be reinforcing these ideas with these children because they don't hear it enough.
Do you find a certain level of people being in denial about the severity of the situation? Because I think sometimes you hear these things and it just seems so bad that it's almost unreal. And if it's something that people don't see every day, you know, there's some people who live in neighborhoods where this is every day, this is happening. And first responders see it. My husband's a battalion chief in the fire department, and they respond. And when people have an overdose and they're given Narcan, they often come out of it upset and mad. They're mad at the first responders because they ruined their high that they were on. And, you know, I think in the old days we would hear overdose and you think pills or something like that. And, you know, they save their life and they think about it, they end up getting some help. But this is the next day, 2 hours later, they're trying to get high again. So this is something so much different than we've ever experienced. I just don't think people in the public have a great grasp of just how bad it is.
And I guess there's you know, it's not just that someone picks up a heroin needle or a packet anymore. Like there's a progression of an illness that we're turning a blind eye to. And I think that's where the big issue comes in. So it's prevention, public awareness, but then it's recognizing changes in somebody you love and actually being able to confront them. Because like you said, people are thinking, oh, this isn't a big deal, or, you know, oh, they're just taking these because their knee really bothers them. But it's not recognizing that progression and doing something about it until you get to kind of the end of the road, which I would think would be administering the Narcan. Do you know what I mean? And then that's where, you know, there's a whole nother level of therapy that has to go on, and you know, the dollar spent downhill measures are so much more compared to the dollar spent in public awareness, education, campaigns, and things like that. So the fact that we're spending a ton of money, time, energy here, I think we need to start focusing on kind of things like upstream things and recognizing that this is a progression and hopefully stopping a few people before they get to that point.
What's your thoughts?
I agree, and I think the big thing, you have the governor, the attorney general, the legislature, the county prosecutors all talking about addiction. People need to not be afraid of the stigma anymore. It can happen to anyone, and the more that we talk about this and the more that it's in the light of day, the more that we can address this issue. And you know, we see that with we do a lot of town forums, you know, public forums, where parents are there with their with their children, and we try to get the message out to both of them at the same time. You know, for the parents, you're not your child's friend; you're their parent. And for the children, just to let them know about how dangerous this could be and what a slope is, what a slippery slope it is once you get on it.
Yeah, I mean, I truly believe the facts are the best thing to present to kids and their parents, because I think there is a level of, you know, denial and not my child or not my child's friends, when a lot of times it's the kids you least suspect that are doing some of the things that are so dangerous.
Sure. And Lisa, I mean, just to really follow up with that, there's also the other end. There's a lot of the success stories for people who were addicted, who went through treatment, are clean. And what I find interesting about the recovery community, and I don't know your experience, Katie, but once someone goes through recovery and is clean, they want to give back. They become life coaches. They become addiction counselors. Teachers, there's a recovery high school in New Jersey. There's a lot of recovering addicts that are teaching there. So there is hope at the end of the tunnel.
That was actually my next question, is for those who are already addicted, you know, is there a light at the end of the tunnel? So I'm happy to hear that. And I think it's like with anything, you know, if you're on a diet and you start reading stories about people who, you know, are doing great and they're doing it healthy, it's inspiring. It makes you think like, okay, this can be done. So if they can see other people who are in recovery and who are overcoming the addiction, but kids need to know this is something that they'll have to think about for the rest of their life. So it's a, you know, a big decision when you just start to do something like that because somebody's handing it to you at a party. Talk to me about what middle school kids, you know, I've heard stories, my kids are in high school now and one's going to middle school, parties where kids actually bring pills.
Yeah, they're called farm parties, but it's spelled P-H-A-R-M.
Okay.
And basically the kids will go into their parents' medicine chest and just grab a bottle. They have a candy dish at the party, and they just dump the pills in there.
Okay, parents, this is a farm party, PHARM, with pharmaceuticals. I mean, I don't even think, it sounds like something from a book. This is really happening. So
It's absolutely happening.
So they play games and
Yeah,
they
it's
just
kind
take
of
random pills.
Take a handful of it, and you know and there's a lot of calls for emergency service there because you don't know what's in that bowl.
And you don't know what they've ingested. I mean,
No, if they were to take mine, they'd have lower blood pressure.
Yeah.
But it really is. You don't know if there's oxycodone, Percocets, Valium. You're never sure what's being dumped into that bowl. And it's incredibly dangerous behavior.
Well, I hope parents who are listening and teachers realize that this is something we need to talk about with kids, because if we are going to focus on that prevention end of it, it's got to be dialogue. We've got to answer their questions honestly. We've got to do a lot of different things so that we can make sure they're armed with the knowledge, because they can't make a good decision if they don't have that information. Are you guys ready to play a game called Brainstorm?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, now I have to just warn you. People who've been on the show, a lot of the guests have been making all their baskets, so no pressure here.
You throw it?
Yes, you throw it. So here's how we play. In the grand tradition of brainstorming, we will look at 8 ideas. If they're good ideas, we'll keep them. And if they are not so good, you get to ball them up, and in the grand tradition of brainstorming, toss them.
Okay.
And no pressure. All these people made their baskets. Okay. Idea number 1. Opioids are the greatest cause of death for people under 50 right now.
Well, while it's not a good idea, it's the truth.
It's the truth. So that is something we are going to keep. Number 2, many addictions start with legitimately prescribed painkillers.
True.
It's very true.
And it's something people need to be aware of. Number 3, the best way to protect children is to shield them from the information.
Absolutely not.
You want to take the inaugural shot here? There you go.
Need a backboard.
Yeah, we do.
See, you didn't need a backboard yet. Yet. Number 4, opioid addiction only affects low-income individuals.
I'll ball that up.
There you go. See
All
that?
right, nice shot.
So I think you guys are in the
played hero
parking lot
basketball in
practicing.
middle school.
All right, number 5, Narcan can cure addiction.
It can't cure addiction. It can merely reduce the effects of the overdose.
Okay, so it can't cure it. Well, you guys are on fire. Number 6, prevention is the best way to reduce addictions.
Absolutely.
True.
Okay. Opioid addiction is a lifelong battle.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing too, Lisa. You hear the people who are in recovery, they always refer to themselves as addicts.
Yes, and I think that's good to remind themselves that they can't take their eye off the ball at that point.
And we know it's a psychological disorder, so it's substance abuse disorder.
Yes.
And you're not using the substance at that time, but you still have the disorder. And that's okay. Just recognize it and acknowledge it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And our final one, there is no way for users to know exactly what is in illegal drugs.
True.
True.
Okay, and you said parents need to be aware of fentanyl, and what was the other one I hadn't heard of?
Carfentanil.
Carfentanil, excellent.
Which is actually an elephant tranquilizer.
An elephant tranquilizer.
It's 100 times more powerful than morphine, and we're starting to see that being introduced more and more.
Okay, well, I can't thank you enough on behalf of all of our viewers and parents out there. The information you provided is so valuable. So thank you both for taking time out of your schedules. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of Brainstorm.
Me and my boy Matt had it good. He had catnip that was off the hook. But one day, he brings a girl home, and she's allergic to cats. Every sneeze was a nail in my coffin. Now I'm in a shelter. It's decent, but they don't even have Wi-Fi.
Everybody has a dream. Mine was to see the ocean. little help.